What's going on, guys? Over the past several years, retro Yu-Gi-Oh formats, or Time Wizard formats as they've become known, have been on the rise, even gaining attention from Konami and supported by Konami for formats such as Goat format, Edison format, and Tengu Plant format. While those formats are still extremely popular now, since it has been several years since people have been playing those formats again, a lot of people have started looking into other past formats and trying to find out what is the next big format, or what is the format that more people are going to jump to once they get tired of one of these other past formats that I previously mentioned, or the formats that people think have the most potential moving forward. Myself included, I am very much so a big fan of retro Yu-Gi-Oh formats. I've played everything from GOAT to Edison to Meadowlands format, Firewater format, Vegas format, Hat format, DUEA format, Clown format, Zodiac format, Tearlament format, so many other past formats, and I can truly say that it's just enjoyable to take a look back at the game's history and try formats that maybe didn't last the longest, or that still had a lot of potential for innovation and other things of those sorts. That being said, today I want to talk about my personal favorite Time Wizard format, which is Hat format, and I want to talk about it being better than you might think, as Hat format does have a very large fan base, but at the same time can sometimes get a bad rep for a handful of different reasons that I'll be talking about in this video, as well as it can be sometimes hard to get newer or older players back into the format for several different reasons. Again, I will be talking about that in this video. And by no means am I trying to say that Hat format is the next big format, though it would be really cool to see that, and in no way am I trying to say that Hat format is going to replace one of those other formats that I mentioned before, such as Goat format, Edison format, or Tengu Plant format. I'm not saying that at all. All I'm trying to say with this video is I think more people should give Hat a chance and not really overlook it and, be a little more open-minded to it. And hopefully with this video, people can get a better understanding of everything you need to know about Hat format. And before I get into the discussion points that I'm going to go over for this video specifically, I want to bring up the topic of what makes a format enjoyable. For example, is it because it takes skill? Is it because of the interactive gameplay, the potential for innovation? Different from other formats, maybe it's nostalgic or something else. And keep that in mind as you watch this video. And also, if you want, go down to the comment section and leave a quick comment talking about what a format being enjoyable means to you and what makes a format something that you want to play moving forward. Getting straight into this video though, here are the discussion points I want to kind of focus on for this video for Hat format specifically. The first of which is obviously going to be what is Hat format. Next, what's the appeal or why you should play Hat format in general. Then I want to go over the misconceptions of the format. For example, the notoriously broken cards that are in Hat format, the obvious best decks, as that's an argument that a lot of people like to make for Hat format, such as also being the lack of removal, and a lot of other topics for the misconceptions. And then the last thing is I want to talk about the problems with the format. To me, as someone who's played a lot of retro Yu-Gi-Oh, I don't think there is a perfect format. There's always going to be something that someone doesn't like about a specific format, whether that be a tech card that is around in that time, and obviously there not being any future ban list because it's set in time. You reach a lot of problems with things like that, or maybe someone doesn't like a specific deck, or there's some aspect to the format that people don't like. And again, unlike a lot of people, I'm going to talk bad on the format that I support. I'm going to talk about what things that I think, it would be better without. But in general, these are what I want to talk about. And again, by no way, shape, or form am I trying to replace any other previous format. I just want to open the, idea of Hat format being a bigger format and getting more people to actually come and play it. So for starters, what is Hat format? Hat format, or HAT, is an acronym for Hands, Artifacts, and Traptrix, which are three prominently played engines, which all came out for HAT format or over the span of time leading up to HAT format. It's the last Yu-Gi-Oh! Format of the Zexal era, following Vegas format and its pre-Duelist Alliance. The next thing is it takes place in 2014's NAWCQ season and follows the April 2014 ban list. Unlike what a lot of people believe, it's not the July 2014 ban list that actually got put into place right after the NAWCQ or after the WCQ season in general. MBT had recently put out a video talking about other formats, and one of his main concerns was putting a time frame on HAT format, and he brought up the point of what he considered to be called early HAT as well as high HAT. And that talked about basically pre the NAWCQ. It talked about the time period after the NAWCQ, but before Duelist Alliance came out. And he brought up how there's like 2 or 3 different time zones that HAT could actually fall under. But what I can tell you is being part of a lot of the HAT format Discord servers and playing HAT for so many years, people don't really consider it broken down into any points, as the main thing that people could talk about when they talk about HAT format is going to be exactly what I put there, which is the NAWCQ. So the ban list is the April 2014 ban list that was played at the NAWCQ, not afterwards. And I guess it's kind of similar to Edison, how Edison format is the format for, SJC Edison. There was time periods, slightly before, slightly after, but that didn't change and make so Edison is all these different formats. So I think that's already kind of a misconception that people have, but just keep that in mind. Besides that, compared to Vegas format, which was again the format right before HAT format includes Dragons of Legend, Primal Origin, and the Realm of Light structure deck. So this introduced a lot of different archetypes and things, and again, I'll talk about that a bit more as we move forward. So now let's dig a little deeper. What's the appeal, and why play HAT format in general? Well, for starters, similar to Edison and Tengu Plant format, HAT format is pre-Master Rule 3. This means that the starting player will still get the chance to draw for turn, which is always nice. There's no pendulum monsters, which means there's definitely not any link monsters in this format. And this is really perfect, I think, for new players who never got to experience the game without Pendulum and Link monsters, because I can't tell you how many different players jump to formats like Edison or Goat or Tengu Plant format simply because they never got to see the game in kind of what made it the game it is today. It's such a faster pace in modern Yu-Gi-Oh!, so it is nice to take a step back and kind of see part of the game's history. I think that's, again, one of the fun things of these retro Yu-Gi-Oh! Formats. The other thing is, it's also great for older players who stop playing the game because of the release of Pendulums and Link monsters. Again, not having access to those is really, really nice for a lot of people who enjoy the older formats and not wanting to have to learn so many new mechanics. The oldest mechanic in HAT format is going to be Xyz summoning, which Tengu Plant format does have a very early stage of Xyz summoning, but again, HAT format being the last, format for the Zexal era means you have access to a much wider card pool and really shows off what Xyz summoning is to its fullest extent. Speaking of the card pool, HAT format has all the packs that you see on the screen available for you to actually build and play decks with. HAT format takes place over 4 years after Edison format and almost 3 years after Tengu format. Yu-Gi-Oh! Releases about 4 core booster sets in a year, and that's not including side sets, structure decks, and other products, so you can just kind of imagine how many more sets are available. Looking at something, for example, like Edison format that stopped right around Absolute Power Force Shining Darkness times, you can see just the mass amount of packs shown that are after that. Or even take, for example, Tengu Plant format that stopped right around Generation Force. You still see several packs after that. Again, keep in mind, this is only the main sets. So there's still tons of side sets, structure decks, and other products that were coming out that you have access to. Even in more modern times, people have even started looking to redo format or September 2012 format, which is a very fun format too. I think that included things like Return of the Duelist and Abyss Rising. I think some people are going with Abyss Rising, some people aren't, or just around that time period in general. And even going as far as to 2012 and only jumping to 2014, there are still so many packs available, which is really nice. And as a result, Hat format includes a lot of fan favorite archetypes from the Zexal era and prior to that. So any of those prior formats, there are newer iterations of those decks, which is actually something that I think to be very, very cool. Speaking of all the available decks, here's just a small list of just a few of the decks that you can actually play in Hat format. And before you think, oh, you could just name any bad decks, most of these decks, if not all of them, have had some form of success in online Hat format tournaments in the past year or two. So that just goes to show you that these decks, are decks that are around in the format, and people know of a lot of these decks in the format, as well as there are always new innovations coming out. So I'm just going to quickly read over some of these decks. There's Bujin, Infernity, Harpy, Sylvan, Gusto, Geargia, Constellar Artifact, Noble Knight, Battling Boxer, Lightsworn Ruler, Koikimiru, Firefist, Ghostrix, Spirit, Madolche, Hieratic Ruler, Zealgigas OTK, Inzektor Artifact, Evil Swarm, Cyber Dragon Artifact, Fire King Hands, Watt, Hunter, Heraldic Beast, Baby Raccoon, Tin Gadgets, Dark World, Mermail, Traptrix, Worm, Fat, Spellbook, Chainburn, Spirit Control, Hat, Twilight, Gravekeeper Artifact, and like I said, there are so many new versions of these decks that are being created all the time, as well as just other people trying so many different decks and trying to come up with new innovations. It's a good mix of playstyles if you prefer playing a combo deck, a control deck, an aggro deck, a ramp deck, a stun deck. There's even things, the occasional but inconsistent FTK. There's a deck literally for everyone, and some of these are the most fun games you can have, but I'll talk more into the gameplay in just a little bit here. Part of the reason a lot of those decks are now able to be played is because of the namesake of the format, hands, artifacts, and Traptrix. These are splashable engines that allow many weaker decks to become competitively viable and stand up to the meta. First off, we have hands that act as defense going first or board breakers going second. They're level 4 monsters that have abilities when destroyed by the opponent, whether that be by battle or card effect. Fire Hand is able to pop a monster and then special summon a Ice Hand from deck, and Ice Hand is able to pop a spell or trap card the opponent controls and summon a Fire Hand from deck, which is really cool. The artifacts act as interruptions on the opponent's turn. They're monsters that are able to be special summon or able to be set in the spell and trap card zone, and then when they're destroyed by a card or effect or something on the opponent's turn, they're able to special summon themselves, and then they get different effects based on whatever they may be. And then you have the Traptrix that are just good +1s going first or second. Cards like Mermail, for example, the monster in the upper left-hand corner of the Traptrix picture, on normal summon will search you a normal trap hole card, and when it's special summon can pop a opponent's spell or trap card, and Dianea is able to basically reborn your Mermail or another copy of one of your Traptrix monsters from graveyard and on its normal summon, and then it gains an additional ability being able to reset your whole normal traps from graveyard when it is special summoned. The other key thing to note is all of these can work really well with being able to make rank 4 and 5 monsters, which also allow you to, besides being able to break boards and get advantage, allow you to actually put up more disruption and allows very interesting gameplay that all players have to be aware of at any time during the game. So, speaking of gameplay, one thing that a lot of people like about Edison format and, GOAT format and any previous format mentioned is hat format, the games are very back and forth and take a lot of skill. Hat format has very low amounts of omni negates, but it is considered a trap heavy format. There are a lot of traps in the format. This being said, it means a lot of games come down to resource management and technical play, playing through traps and hand traps. This format does have cards such as DD Crow, Maxx C, Effect Veiler, Flying C, Skullmeister, and other hand traps, as well as, your basic low or high impact trap cards such as one copy of Solemn Warning, one copy of Compulse, one copy of Torrential, one copy of Bottomless Trap Hole, amongst other trap cards. So, everything is kind of balanced in terms of your basic staples. Now, we will talk about the more broken stuff or what people consider to be more broken a little bit later in the video, but getting back to the gameplay, playing Reckless can easily cost you the game even if you open perfectly. Resource management in general in Yu-Gi-Oh! Is extremely important, and hat format really shows that, as a lot of these games are extremely grindy. Besides all of that, the ban list allows for players to experience powerful cards and popular cards such as Maxx C, Dragon Rulers, Soul Charge, Lavalval Chain, and a lot of other cards. Again, I will be talking more on that a little bit later. But because of all the different playstyles and different decks, every matchup can be very different. Managing your resources is extremely, extremely important, and hat format definitely shows that. Another highlight for hat format is simply its affordability. Compared to back in 2014, most necessary staples now have plenty of reprints, and you can easily build a tournament-ready level hat format deck for around $50. If you look off to the right-hand corner, I actually have a screenshot of the cart of a hat deck that actually won a fairly sizable hat format tournament online, and the market price of that deck was under $60. And keep in mind, that is full retail. So, a lot of people will buy at, a lower percentage online, for example, paying like 85% if you're in any of the Facebook market groups or anything like that. So you can definitely get these for a lot cheaper. Some of these staples, even looking at something like Dracosack, that was once a $100 to almost $200 card during Dragon Ruler format, you can now get copies of for 9 cents, 4 cents. Cards like Honor Arc that at one point when they came out in hat format were, closer to that $40+ range. Now you can get them for under 50 cents. Exciton was a card that was, I remember it being $80+ at one point. And back then there weren't reprints of a lot of these cards. You can now get something like that for 10 cents. There's even one listing right there that I had seen for a cent. Or other cards, Moral Tax, Sanctums, the Hands. You can get them all for extremely cheap now. But anyways, GOAT and Edison format have only recently started getting reprints of a lot of their more necessary cards after those formats have been in the spotlight for years. So hat format is a format you can easily just jump into, and what I'm talking about is the Stampede Rarity Collection coming up soon is bringing cards like Dust Shoot, Metamorphosis, and Amaryllis, which were all previously pretty expensive cards, honestly. So, hat format already has a ton of those reprints, so you don't have to worry about overspending. So you've heard the good now, let's talk about some of the misconceptions of hat format and why people don't give it a chance. The main things I want you to think about are the broken cards, the lack of removal because cards like Heavy Storm and Feather Duster are banned in what is considered to be, again, a very trap-heavy format. And I also want to talk about the argument that there are clear best decks, and also kind of a subnote of that, a lot of people say that once hat format were to take off, Infernity is going to become the best deck, and Infernity encourages cheating, and I want to say that's just simply not the case. Like I said, I'm going to talk about this as we move forward, and I'm going to kind of talk about all those points all at once, so just keep that in mind as we move forward. So here are just a couple examples of the toxic, sacky, broken cards that people think are going to make Hat format unenjoyable. All at 3 copies, you have 3 copies of Maxx C, 3 copies of Artifact Scythe, Soul Charge, Kaiser Colosseum, Vanity's Emptiness, and other floodgates such as Skill Drain, Rivalry, and other cards like that. Now, what I can say is most formats in general are going to have some sort of broken card in it. Take a look at Edison format, where people just hate the fact that cards like Trap Dust Shoot are legal. Some people don't even like cards like Heavy Storm or Brain Control and stuff like that. So Hat format, while it does have a lot of broken cards in it, I feel because of the more advanced card pool, a lot of these cards actually don't have as much impact. Also because the game still wasn't at a super fast pace the way it is today. Don't get me wrong, these cards are extremely powerful, and I'm going to go over some deck lists and stuff here shortly so you can kind of see how many of these are actually seeing play and stuff, but just keep in mind that it's fairly balanced. I can't tell you how many times I've heard an Edison player or something complain about some of those broken cards, whereas in Hat format, you do hear people saying, they top deck the Soul Charge and completely, won. But at the same time, think of a card like Traptrix Mermail. It has 1,600 attack. If you summon that and you poke 1 or 2 times, you've already eliminated a lot of the chance that a player has to actually go and make a big Soul Charge play. And with that being said, again, there's not all these crazy cards that we have in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! So maybe even summoning 1 or 2 monsters can, put you back in the game, but it's not putting you overly ahead of your opponent. There definitely are cases, again, with any format that's going to be the case, but I believe that a lot of these cards, some of which don't even really see play anymore in the format. Again, I'm going to go over that in a second, but I don't think they're as bad as people think in Hat format specifically. So 2 of the biggest offenders of those broken cards that people think about are going to be Vanity's Emptiness and Kaiser Colosseum, 2 cards that are notoriously known for being extremely broken. And one of the decks that is most known for playing those back in 2014 was Bujin. But here I have 2 different first place deck lists from more recent Hat format tournaments. I think there was about a year in between both of them. 2 different players, 2 different events over a year apart. So yeah. And if you look at these lists, neither have Vanity's Emptiness or Kaiser Colosseum in the main or side deck. So for cards that are so broken, why are these decks not playing them? The reason is because this is just like, it's a much worse card when not opened going first. For example, if you have a Vanity's Emptiness, but your opponent has already comboed off, you're not really stopping anything. Vanity's Emptiness has its own built-in destruction type effect. So for a deck like Bujin that, is Protect Yamato, you're not really doing much when going second, and as a result, people have really cut down on these types of cards, as well as people are playing a lot of back row removal. You don't have cards like Heavy Storm, and you don't have cards like Feather Duster, but there are other cards. For example, looking at these lists, you can see in the side deck cards such as MSTs, you see cards such as Wiretaps to deal with some of the trap card floodgates and things like that. You have Twister, you have cards like Dust Tornado, so many different outs to a lot of those types of cards. There is an exception though, some decks that can consistently make Master Key Beetle or Stardust Spark Dragon may choose to main or side those. Usually you'll see them more so in the side deck when, again, the player knows they are going to be going first. But even then, there are still several outs, and playing cards and other hand traps, for example, DD Crows and Maxx C's and stuff, sometimes that can play a big role in your opponent not even going into some of those cards. And so that's what I want to say in terms of Vanities and Kaiser. Now let's talk about some of those hand traps and other cards. Here, I have 3 different players playing 3 different events, all on 3 different decks and 3 different play styles. There's an aggro deck, a control deck, and one that's kind of in between everything. Looking at these lists, again, none of them are on Vanity's Emptiness or Kaiser Colosseum, And something that you'll see that's kind of interesting is none of them are maining Maxx C either. Here we see that all are choosing to side Maxx C versus maining them, and even one of the decks, or maybe even two of the decks here, aren't even siding it at 3 copies. And this is due to the vast amount of decks and playstyles in the format. Maxx C can sometimes be considered a dead card in certain matchups, or best case, an upstart goblin. Look at the Bujin deck. It usually, for the most part, is just going to be normal summoning one monster, playing some back row, and just trying to protect the one monster. So if you see a Maxx C, you're kind of down one card, and Bujin can gain a lot of advantage very quickly. As a result, another big innovation that this format had was playing cards like DD Crow. While it might seem pretty simple, a lot of players back in 2014 were not playing DD Crow, but DD Crow hits so many good decks. It hits the Lightsworn ruler decks, it hits the artifact monsters that go to graveyard before summoning, it hits, for example, the Bujin deck, it hits a lot of those graveyard type effects, and a lot of people would even argue that DD Crow in H.A.T format is better than Maxx C, which is crazy to think about if you're looking at it from a format where in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Maxx C would be insane, or even just thinking back in the day, oh, Maxx C seemed like such a crazy card. But in reality, you know, it's a decent card. It is a very good card in a lot of matchups. But even then, most of the time, again, you're only getting 1 to 2 draws. After that, there are, again, other hand traps that people play. Looking in the side deck of the deck all the way on the right, the Cyber Dragon artifact deck, they're siding cards like Cycle Reader and Flying Sea. So just again, more examples of more innovations and cards that people would rather prioritize. That Cyber Dragon artifact deck is playing 3 copies of Flying Sea, but only 2 copies of Maxx C in the side, and they're maining DD Crows. So that should really tell you something. Another thing I want to bring up is with some of those more floodgatey type cards, the hands, for example, can deal with those too. Ice Hand being able to pop cards when destroyed, spell and traps to be specific, is another way to out the opponent's back row. For the artifacts, you have Artifact Ignition and Double Cyclone, more back row removal. So there's just a lot of different changes and ways to actually out opponents' cards, and so a lot of these cards that people are so afraid of become a lot less impactful. Now, in terms of people saying that there's a best deck in H.A.T format, again, I completely disagree with that, and here are a couple screenshots from a couple more recent H.A.T format online tournaments, and just looking at the different types of decks that are able to top really shows the diversity of the format and how wrong those people are. Looking at this, we see Constellar Artifact, Koikimiru Firefist, Geargia, Constellar Artifact, Geargia, Artifact Traptrix, Fire King, Gadget, Infernity, Mermail, Bujin, Mythic Ruler, Spellbook, Hieratic Ruler, Harpy, Mermail, Cyber Dragon Artifact, Evil Swarm, Karakuri, Geargia, Spellbook, Artifact, Gravekeeper, Bujin. There are so many different decks, and look at the placings. These are all top 8 finishes. So a lot of first place, a lot of second place, a lot of third place, and so on and so forth. These decks are taking up a lot of the top cuts of just random stuff. And again, there's been even more recent events since I actually made this. And what I can say from that is I probably should have updated it with some of the even more recent pictures, because even more decks that weren't even considerable maybe a year ago in H.A.T format have started coming out, and people have started playing around with it, and there is so much innovation going on in this format, and there's still so much unexplored ground that it really does show what a cool format this is. Now, in terms of Infernity, Infernity is one of those decks where it can go crazy when going off. You know, I've shown a lot of videos on my channel and stuff talking about how crazy Infernity combos can be. But that being said, similar to all the Floodgate hate and stuff like that people have learned to play, cards like DD Crow and Maxx C being in the side deck, and just the way people have started building decks, it's really kind of evened out the playing field so that a deck like Infernity, while it is still a very strong deck, a lot of people might argue that Infernity is more of a tier 2 or tier 3 deck even in current Hat format. Now, there is always the problem of cheating that happens with Hat, or with, I guess, Infernity in general, being that Infernity is a deck that you need to have no cards in hand to be able to use most of your effects, and notoriously it was a deck known of people setting monsters in their back row and stuff to clear their hand. I can't really say too much on that topic because I feel that in any sort of format, cheating, if there's a prize or something involved, there's unfortunately always going to be people that kind of ruin it for everyone in terms of having to cheat, and there's not really any honor in doing that, in my opinion. So I can't really say too much on that, so I guess you guys do have a good argument with Infernity specifically, but at the same time, all these other decks being able to top have kind of shown that Infernity, even then, isn't the strongest and best deck of the format. With that being said, here are a couple of the bad or downsides of Hat format that I have found from playing this format for so many years. The first off is, due to the diverse format, it can be hard to prepare for everything. And what I mean by that is a lot of people prefer these 3 or 4 deck formats such as Duelist Alliance format and stuff like that, because you only have to really know what the top 3 other decks are doing, whereas Hat format, there's so much going on all the time that you kind of have to pick and choose what you find to be your worst matchups. I think personally it can be a lot of fun because it means you really have to take a deep look at your deck, but at the same time, a lot of people don't enjoy that. They'd rather just have a clear out. For example, in modern Yu-Gi-Oh!, people know if you drop a Artifact Lancia against a Malice player, it's usually going to be close to a turn skip. So, a lot of people prefer stuff like that, and Hat format, unfortunately, is diverse, which, who would think that's a downside? After that, games can feel a little repetitive or drawn out, and that's partially because of many decks playing the hands, artifacts, and Traptrix, as well as the sheer amount of trap cards in the format. This can give the illusion that only the top decks can actually compete, even though a lot of the decks are different, they're just playing certain engines. I feel that would be kind of like, in a sense, of decks maybe in modern times playing Fiendsmith, but even then I feel Fiendsmith is just one engine, whereas in Hat format, obviously you have the 3 main ones that I talked about being hands, artifacts, and Traptrix, but there's also the Fire Fist engine, there's the Ghost Trick engine. Ghost Trick, even for example, a deck that people think is bad, actually has even recently gotten a top in Hat format in a 40 or 50 person event, which is pretty cool to see. But yeah, no, some games, they are very back and forth. Again, it feels weird saying that the fact there's interaction and games can be drawn out a little is a downside, because people like playing the game, but it does really make you use your mind. And for some people, that can be a little, tiring and stuff, especially if you're playing multiple rounds of this. After that, going first is still the best in most cases. Some people don't like the idea that whoever gets to go first gets to set up and do everything they want, but as I mentioned previously, a lot of decks are capable of easily going first or second. It just becomes a resource management game of how well you can play through your opponent's cards. But again, cards like the hands and the artifacts and Traptrix kind of allow players to be able to play good going first or second. It just might feel like an uphill battle, especially because of your opponent getting to draw for turn. Lastly, the other thing I thought about was the chance of buyouts. While the format is cheap and affordable at the moment, with enough attention, several cards with only a few printings could pop in price, not necessarily staples, but cards needed for some strategies. So some of the more odd or deck-specific type cards, I guess similar to the way Edison has cards like Black Brute Drago that had shot up in price, or even cards like Amaryllis that had shot up in price, or a lot of the frog stuff have gone up in price. So Hat format definitely has the possibility for that, but that just would require enough attention, and even then, that's only a few things. So if you're not on those decks, then it's not even the biggest deal there, I would say. At the end of the day, Hat format is a diverse format with plenty of fan favorite deck options for everyone. Competitive decks are affordable and games are extremely interactive. Truly the perfect format for players wanting to experience the nostalgic Zexal era of the game before the addition of Master Rule 3. And again, I'm not trying to replace any format. I truly do enjoy formats like GOAT format, Edison format, Meadowlands format, DUEA format, all these different past formats. I have a lot of decks actually built for a lot of those formats. I've even thought about, if I wasn't such a big die-hard Hat format fan, what other format I would probably jump to in terms of a little lesser known. And I'm always exploring other formats. I've explored everything, even I think it was 2003 or 2004 Worlds, which was kind of, pretty similar to GOAT format, but it's a ton of fun just being able to play the hand control stuff. And there's a lot of other formats that I think are great, and I just wanted to draw a little more attention to Hat format and just say that give it a chance. Try it out once or twice. You don't even have to go super competitive. Pick a fun deck and just see how the games go. It really is a lot better than people expect. Obviously, there's going to be rulings and different things that you'll have to learn over time, as well as just learning the format, but I do think it is worth at least giving a shot. I know a ton of pro players do enjoy Hat format as well. I know there's a lot of people pushing, again, 2012 format right now, and they also enjoy Hat format here and there, as well as a lot of the pro Edison players. Some of them like to play it, but I guess sometimes playing and switching over to another format can kind of feel like arguing about an anime fan who is really big into Dragon Ball Z. It's kind of like saying like the meme of who's the strongest character in all of anime, and everyone's like, oh, but can he beat Goku? So sometimes it kind of feels like pulling a leg and stuff on people trying to switch formats. But anyways, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to leave a like on it. Comment any questions or videos you want to see in the future. Let me know your opinion in the comment section, but let's keep it civil. We're just trying to have a nice discussion here. And make sure you subscribe to the channel and you hit the bell to get notified anytime I put a new video out. I'm always showing off Hat format content, whether that's gameplay, deck discussions, deck videos, combo tutorials, and things like that. So if you want more ideas into the format, definitely check out some of that gameplay and share this video with your friend. Again, let's kind of get this video going around a little bit and get more people involved in retro Yu-Gi-Oh in general. But anyways, guys, I will see you in the next video.